Gabriel and Sharon's love was like a flame that burned bright and true. They were each other's everything, and the thought of being apart was unbearable. But Sharon's fear was a constant shadow that loomed over their relationship. She couldn't shake the feeling that Gabriel's job as a soldier put him in harm's way, and that one day she might lose him forever. Gabriel, on the other hand, loved his job as a soldier. He felt a sense of purpose and duty that he couldn't find anywhere else. He was proud to serve his country, and he knew that his work made a difference. But he also knew that his job came with risks, and that Sharon's fears were not unfounded. Sharon's anxiety was palpable every time Gabriel went on a mission or to work. She would wait for hours, even days, for him to return, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. She couldn't bear the thought of raising their future children without a father, or of living the rest of her life without her soulmate. Gabriel tried to reassure Sharon that he was careful, that he took precautions, and that he was well trained. But she knew that even with all his training and expertise, he was still human, and that accidents could happen. She felt like she was living on borrowed time, waiting for the other shoe to drop. One day, Sharon reached her breaking point. She couldn't take the constant worry and fear anymore. She sat Gabriel down and asked him to choose between his job and their life together. She knew it was an unfair ask, but she couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Gabriel was taken aback by Sharon's ultimatum. He loved his job, but he loved Sharon more. He knew that he couldn't imagine a life without her by his side. But he also knew that he couldn't just quit his job, not when he felt so strongly about serving his country. Gabriel tried to find a compromise, to reassure Sharon that he would do everything in his power to stay safe. But Sharon was resolute. She couldn't take the risk, not when their future and their family were at stake. She felt like she was fighting for their survival. Gabriel was overjoyed when Sharon finally agreed to marry him, despite her initial reservations about his job as a soldier. He thought that their love had conquered all, and that she had finally understood the importance of his work. But as time passed, Sharon began to feel the weight of her fears once again. She was bored and lonely, waiting for Gabriel to come back from his missions, and the stress was taking a toll on her. She brought up the topic of his job again, telling Gabriel that she prayed every day for his safe return. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, especially now that they had a child together. Gabriel tried to reassure her, telling her that he was careful and that his training would keep him safe. But Sharon was unconvinced, and her fears only grew stronger with each passing day. She began to plead with Gabriel to resign from the military, telling him that she couldn't take the stress of waiting for him to come back from each mission. She wanted him to be safe, to be home with her and their child. Gabriel was torn. He loved his job, but he loved Sharon and their child more. He didn't want to lose them, but he also didn't want to give up on his duty to serve his country. After several days of Sharon's persistent pleas, Gabriel finally agreed to resign from the military. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he couldn't bear the thought of losing his family. But there was a catch. Gabriel had one final mission to complete before he could officially resign. He had to see it through, no matter how much Sharon pleaded with him to stay. Sharon was devastated when Gabriel told her about the final mission. She felt like she had been betrayed, like he was putting his job above their family's safety. Gabriel explained to her that this was his last mission, that he would come back to her and their child and never leave again. The days leading up to Gabriel's final mission were tense and stressful. Sharon barely spoke to him. Gabriel knew he had to make this mission a success, not just for his country, but for his family. He had to come back to them, to prove to Sharon that he was committed to their safety. The day of the mission arrived, and Gabriel set off with a heavy heart. He knew that this was it, that this was his last chance to prove himself to Sharon and their child. Sharon waited anxiously for Gabriel's return, her heart racing with every passing minute. She had been so relieved when he told her about his final mission, thinking that their nightmare was finally over. But as the hours ticked by, Sharon began to feel a sense of unease. Where was Gabriel? Why hadn't he come home yet? The knock on the door made her heart skip a beat. She opened it to find a group of somber-faced military men, their eyes filled with a sorrow that made her blood run cold. They told her the news that she had been dreading: Gabriel was gone. He had been lost during the mission, and they couldn't recover his body. Sharon felt like she had been punched in the gut. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was collapse to the ground, her world shattered into a million pieces. When she came to, she was surrounded by the military men, their faces blurry and indistinct. She thought it was all a dream, a cruel and twisted nightmare. But as she sat up, reality hit her like a ton of bricks. Gabriel was really gone. He had left her and their child behind, and she was alone. Sharon felt a wave of anger and frustration wash over her. Why had life been so unfair to her? Why had Gabriel been taken away from her, just when they were about to start their new life together? She thought about all the times she had pleaded with Gabriel to resign, to leave the military and come home to her. If only he had listened, he would still be alive today. The grief and guilt consumed her, eating away at her soul. Sharon was left alone, wondering why life had been so cruel to her, and why Gabriel had been taken away from her, just when they needed him most. Sharon had been living in a state of limbo for months, unable to shake off the feeling that Gabriel was still alive. She couldn't understand why the military men hadn't found his body, and a glimmer of hope had been burning inside her. 1 year had passed since Gabriel's supposed death, and Sharon was still holding on to his picture, cherishing the memories they had made together. She had almost given up hope, but something inside her refused to let go. The knock on the door broke the silence, and Sharon's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and a sense of trepidation washed over her. She reluctantly made her way to the door, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. She opened it to find a man dressed in a cap and eyeglass, his face obscured from view. Sharon was taken aback, unsure of what to make of the stranger. She tried to close the door, but he forcefully pushed his way in, his eyes fixed on her. Sharon was terrified, her mind racing with thoughts of an intruder. She tried to shout for help, but the man quickly removed his cap and eyeglass, revealing a face she thought she'd never see again. Gabriel stood before her, his eyes filled with a deep sadness and regret. Sharon's mind reeled as she tried to process what she was seeing. She felt like she was dreaming, like this was some cruel joke. But as she looked into Gabriel's eyes, she knew that this was real. Gabriel's face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, and his skin pale. He looked like he had been through hell and back. Sharon's heart went out to him, and she felt a wave of compassion wash over her. Gabriel took a step forward, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. Sharon's anger and hurt melted away, replaced by a deep sense of love and compassion. She opened her arms, and Gabriel fell into them, his body shaking with sobs. Sharon held him tight, tears streaming down her face. They stood there for what felt like hours, holding each other, their hearts beating as one. Sharon couldn't believe that Gabriel was alive, that he had come back to her. Gabriel's revelation left Sharon reeling. She couldn't believe that his teammate had tried to kill him, leaving him for dead. She felt a wave of anger wash over her, wondering how someone could do such a thing to their own comrade. Gabriel saw the anger in her eyes and knew he had to explain. He took a deep breath and began to tell her about his plan. He told her that he had one more mission to accomplish, but Sharon's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. She thought he was going to leave her again, going off on some dangerous mission that could get him killed. But Gabriel quickly reassured her, explaining that this mission was different. He told her that he had to unveil the traitors who had tried to kill him, to bring them to justice. Sharon's anger turned to determination as she realized what Gabriel was planning. She knew that he had to do this, to clear his name and protect others from the same fate. Gabriel's eyes locked onto hers, and Sharon saw the depth of his conviction. She knew that he wouldn't rest until he had completed this mission, until he had made things right. Sharon felt a surge of pride and admiration for her husband, knowing that he was willing to risk everything for what was right. She took his hand, her touch filled with a newfound sense of respect and understanding. Gabriel's face softened, his eyes filled with gratitude for her support. He knew that this mission wouldn't be easy, but with Sharon by his side, he felt a sense of hope. Together, they began to plan, strategizing and preparing for what was to come. Sharon's mind raced with scenarios, thinking of all the possible outcomes, but she pushed aside her fears, focusing on the task at hand. She knew that Gabriel had to do this, and she was determined to stand by him every step of the way. As they sat there, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes, Sharon knew that their love and determination would see them through, no matter what lay ahead.